Bethany White. She is the author of the collection of poems Fast Fat Girls and Pink Hot Pants. Super awesome title. She has received the Mona Van Dyne Scholarship in Poetry from the Sewanee Writers Conference and the Mary Hambridge Distinguished Fellowship from the Hambridge Center for the Creative Arts for her nonfiction. She is currently nonfiction guest editor for Blood Orange Review. Recent poetry has appeared in Ecotone, Poet Lore, Harvard Review, and the New Guard, and is forthcoming in Pleiades. New nonfiction appears in the Hopkins Review and is forthcoming in Tupelo Quarterly. She is visiting assistant professor of American Cultural Studies at Albright College in Pennsylvania. Please welcome our special guest, Artress White.
Of beer and rattlesnakes on Sunday morning. What was this strange Sunday ritual? The women going to church on a cloud of lily of the valley perfume, while the men sat not so guiltily on the porch, the telltale brown paper sack waiting on the ground. They licked their lips in anticipation while speaking that old lie. We'll be waiting until you get home to tell us all about the sermon. The snap and slither of that first can being opened was a signal to start lying in earnest about past women, fights won, and hard luck years when neither the women nor the jobs were plentiful. And that's when Peter Bo, or Bo Pete, that lost sheep of the family, who would mow your lawn or wash your car for a pittance, came sauntering down the street with a rattlesnake hanging dead from his hands. He was delivering his Odyssean boast to anyone who'd hear how a black man had slain the killer before it slew him. So what if it was a shovel instead of a shotgun that had won the day? The men laughed and lobbed him a beer, because here in the flesh was the reason why they shunned church on Sunday mornings. The one day a working man had to himself to experience the contentment of having to be nowhere at any specific time. None of them would trade their lives for anything else. Being single would be a hardship now that their flat stomachs had turned to paunch, their full heads of nappy hair now worn with a corona of baldness at the center. They'd learned to accept their women too, knew that they were no studs, but a good wife never complained, just closed her eyes and imagined a good man who would one day share her church pew and not notice how every now and then she pulled a beer from his six-pack, just to remind herself of what holiness wasn't. Fast Fat Girls in Pink Hot Pants. Summers in Immokalee, Florida were a lesson in multiculturalism and economics. As kids, we were told to avoid the Mexicans because they were migrants, seasonal workers with little chance of social mobility and even less English. I would long to try the depth of my elementary Spanish on them, but would become suddenly shy after the initial hola. But our designated playmate was a heavy-set black girl with unwashed hair, whom my grandmother insisted we be nice to because she'd had no advantages. I beg to differ. Her size gave her the advantage to be a bully, and her sweat unwashed for days was enough to make the eyes water and the knees weak. My immediate dislike of this playmate, 5 years ahead of both my sister and I, was her disregard for the truth. She once asked to see my china. Unfamiliar with the turn of phrase, I literally believed she was making reference to the country in Asia and asked her to get a map, and I'd show her. She frowned in consternation, looked at me like I was ignorant, and pointed to her shorts below the waist. 10, but no fool. I realized that she was making reference to my vagina, leaving off the letters V and C and pronouncing the G as C. I turned up my lip and in my best New England clip, with exact pronunciation, said, "You are a nasty girl." Later, walking down the street and eating pickled pig's feet, this Southern delicacy that could be only had below the Mason-Dixon line, I thought about immigrants and migration and why no one had warned me to stay away from fast fat girls and pink hot pants who liked to defile young minds and spoke in English that was like a foreign language while trying to pick fruit that didn't hang on a vine. Plantation wedding. In the middle of my lecture on antebellum plantation life, abolition, Lydia Maria Child, and William Lloyd Garrison, pronged slave collars hung with iron Christmas bells ringing, and Carol Walker's Booth, a recasting of slavery for the next generation. I finally vocalize a question I've often suppressed while binge-watching episodes of Say Yes to the Dress. An inquiry prompted by Southern belles with vision of scarlet dancing through their heads and modeling some confection like the curtain admired by Rhett. Why would any woman stage her 21st century wedding on a plantation, where masters slake their lust on shivering bodies of black boys and girls, while out in the fields blood seeped from cow-hided backs, shouldering rough cotton sacks? The ghosts of slaves still silently watching. The unmaking of Bianca Roberson. Dust to dust is a grave, parting between a child and her parents. Parents raised the lamb, tempted the tiger on a Pennsylvania highway. Highways shepherd hate when a cat lives up to his stripes. Striped ribbons of blood flood a girl's face, twisted ominously treeward. Trees crowd the mind of a father lost in the woods of his daughter's death. Death drives a red pickup, trapped in the will of his own sinister making. Making it, making it, making it. A mother and father labor, then suddenly don't. The dream of leave-taking, never as sweet as the actual leaving. No more explaining how this southern town leaches like calcium sucked from bones. The bending near to breaking. Think desert, think lonesome wolf howls. Hollowed goodbyes echo empty even to my own ears. A nose opens in anticipation of home, the scent of years beckoning. I airplane arms and run up the interstate of my mind like a toddler convinced lanes can fit into an embrace. I settle for hugging trees, nuzzle leaves, and recall childhood in a pinetum of peace. The spice notes of conifers begging, begging to be swallowed again. Thank you.